We are back for another episode of Ampt Live. Hopefully you find these useful and get some interesting things out of it, maybe learn some other distributed systems concepts, some weird front-end stuff, I don't know. Hope is that, again, there's some value here to you. So anyways, I'm Jeremy Daly. I am the CEO here at Ampt. If you're not familiar with Ampt, essentially it is a developer tool that makes it really, really easy for anyone with JavaScript, TypeScript skills to build applications on AWS by just writing code. So no infrastructure as code, no worries, or no need to worry about things like Pulumi or Terraform or CloudFormation or CDK or any of those things. It just sort of does it for you, and you have a lot of control. But anyways, today I wanted to talk about building a CRUDL app. So if you're not familiar with this horrible term CRUDL, it stands for create, read, update, delete, and list. So this essentially is an API that allows you to create something in a database, be able to read that individual item back, be able to update that item, be able to delete that item, and then also be able to get a list of those items. So pretty standard, not an overly complex thing, but we're going to build one with Ampt. We're going to build a CRUDL API with Ampt, and then if we have a little bit of time, maybe we'll add some authentication and things like that. Okay, so a couple quick things about CRUD or CRUDL apps. Is they generally do a specific type of HTTP verb. If you're familiar with HTTP verbs, you should be. Those are get, post, put, patch, and delete, and we want to match those up so that we have all of the operations we need to do. So, quick thing on post versus patch versus put. So I know that most people just use get and posts nowadays. Fine, that works fine. Usually you're sending some sort of operation to the server anyways. A lot of people using RPC and some of these things now too, so that or GraphQL, right? So the essence of REST APIs has sort of gone away. But essentially, the way that it's supposed to work is that a GET request is going to be for those reads, right? You don't want to modify any data on a GET request. That is just a request for resources. You can use that for both the read as well as list type operations. And then a post operation is meant to create a resource. And I think a lot of people don't think about REST APIs as hypermedia anymore, but essentially what you're doing is you're creating a resource, meaning you're creating a unique HTTP or hypermedia reference to a new resource. And so if you were to post to a user, a /users endpoint, you would get back a resource or a resource URL or uniform resource locator, right? That would be something like /users/123, which would uniquely identify that resource. And then you have what's called a put operation, and put was in the original specification, I believe, in order to replace that resource. So that is not about, if I want to update maybe that user's email address or something like that, I wouldn't do that with a put. I would do that with a patch. So a put is meant to replace the resource that already exists. Some people look at them as like upserts as well, so that if it doesn't exist, a put would create the resource as well. Yes, you can do that also. And then finally patch, which if anyone is confused about this is the RFC for patch. This was introduced all the way back in March of 2010, but essentially says that the existing HTTP put method only allows a complete replacement of a document. This proposal adds a new HTTP method patch to modify an existing HTTP resource. So the idea behind put versus patch is put replaces the document and patch updates that document. We don't use REST APIs correctly most of the time. We just use them as a way to retrieve data, to write data and retrieve data. I don't think most people follow the general practices of HTTP, especially if you're a front-end developer, you're not overly familiar with this. I think that's perfectly fine depending on the type of application you're building. But if you want to build a true REST API that uses those specifications, following all of the hypermedia goodness and so forth, then this would be the way to go. So, anyways, let's go ahead and build an application. And we'll get right into it. So I'm going to use Hono. I always use Hono now. It just is my favorite. It's my favorite web application framework, whatever you want to call it. I just read an article the other night, actually, about using Hono to do RPC. It's got a built-in client that you can use. You can export the types from your routes that you create, from the API routes that you create, and then you can import those into your client-side application, and then you get all of the typing and so forth with an RPC style type command interface, which is pretty cool. That it kind of does all that for you. I think this is the only sort of web framework that does this type of thing. So if you've ever used tRPC or something like that and you're interested in RPC, check out Hono because there's some cool things that you can do here as well. Anyways, easy enough. We'll get into that. So just quickly on Ampt, if you've never used Ampt before, it is pretty simple to get started. Essentially, we're going to install the Ampt CLI, and then we log in, confirm our device and so forth, and then we can start building an actual application. And I just want to make sure, hold on one second, because I have a tendency to go out of focus. That's my fault. My brain goes out of focus sometimes as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and create an app with Ampt. So I'm going to open up, if I can find it here. So this is just Visual Studio Code. I'll open a terminal window here, and I'm just going to go ahead and type in Ampt. I've already installed the CLI. This will check, make sure that we have the most up-to-date version. I'm going to put this in demo, in my demo org, and then I am going to create a new app. Yes, I'd like to create a new app. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Hold on. Let me do this. Let's, because I don't want to create a new app in this directory. That was my fault. So let's go ahead and make a new directory, and we will call this REST API demo, and then we'll cd into REST API demo, clear that, and then we'll go ahead and we will run Ampt. All right, so we'll run Ampt here, put this in the demo. Yes, I want to create a new app. What kind of app do we want to create? So I'm just going to create a Hono app, starter template, and we're going to call this REST API demo, like that. And would you like to do it in the current directory? Yes, I would. So this will generate a template for me, create these quick updates. And essentially what this is doing now is this is creating a new application for me. And it's connecting me to a live AWS account. So I will now have a live AWS account that this will run in. So this is just syncing information. Now it's connecting to the real-time logs. And just like this, I now have this application that if I go ahead and click to open, this is a live URL that is running in an AWS account that's completely isolated to me. It's my AWS account. And if we open up the, oops. Let me do this, hold on. I'm just gonna quickly exit out of there, and I'm gonna type in code dot to open us up in here. So now we have all this information. I don't want that. And open this back up, and let's start up the Ampt terminal again. And this will connect us back to that again, so we're back on that powerful dev there. And so these are the files that we have over here. So this dev container here, we don't need this. This is just a, this is if you want to open it in code spaces. And then we have a gitpod.yaml, which this is if we want to open it in gitpod, which we don't right now. So we're going to do this all locally. And then essentially we have our static folder here. Static folder has this index file in here, which is why we are getting this page here. So if we were to hide this and go down here, we see this is a placeholder to get you started. If I just update this that says, welcome to Ampt, like this, click save, and then I was to refresh this, this immediately updates, and now I get welcome to Ampt. So you'll see anytime I make a change, I'll add a little, oops, let me open up my terminal here so we can see that. Anytime I make a change, so I haven't saved this yet, so we watched down here, last synced several seconds ago. As soon as I save this, we get a little spin. It says just synced now, and then that will go ahead and automatically update this for me. Okay, we don't care about the static folder, so we're going to go ahead and delete this because we're not building a static app. We're, at least not right now, we're going to build a API. So the other thing we can do is just quickly check our package.json file. You'll see that this is, again, we can rename this. This is just from the template, but we'll call this REST API demo like this. And this is an Ampt Hono API demo. All right, we see that the main is set to index.ts, so this is just the entry point for our application. This just tells the system where do I want to try to load this application from. This can be anything you want. It can be in a /app directory or an app/index.ts. And again, this doesn't have to be TypeScript. It's just TypeScript because that's the default that we have for Hono, but if you wanted to make this JavaScript, you could do this You know what, let's do that. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna show you how easy this is. I'm just gonna change that to index.js. I will save that. I'll come over to here and I will rename this as index.js. And we're gonna go ahead to update imports, no, and I'm gonna go ahead and delete this right now. So we're just gonna go and just create. This is just a JavaScript app now. Okay, so we just did that. I'm going to delete all this stuff down here. This is just some stuff to show us how stuff works. And so now I'm going to actually change this to be the default route. We'll go over this in just a second, but I just want to show you how simple this is. So I just refresh. That should all be synced. And I refresh now, and I get hello like that. Okay, so we've got our app set up. That's it. We've got our own AWS account. It's all syncing for us. We don't have to worry about anything. Let's just quickly go over what we're trying to do here, or the basics of this app. So there's really nothing happening in here. I mean, there's no configuration files other than this package.json, which again is pretty simple, right? And we can actually even clean this up a little bit because we don't need that. So this is just loading the Ampt SDK as a dependency and Hono as a dependency. And then we have this little Ampt section here that tells us REST API demo, and the org that we're in is demo. Okay, so then back to the index file. Essentially, we're importing Hono from Hono. Pretty straightforward. These are ESM modules. We do have these set the type to be module by default. You can set these to CommonJS if you want to. Again, ES modules, I just, a little more, I think a little smarter than the old CommonJS, but if you need CommonJS, then you can use that as well. This is running Node 20, so you get all the benefits of Node 20 as well. That runs out of, by default it runs. So, okay, so anyway, so we've got, we're importing Hono. We create a new Hono app. We create a get route. This is actually using web standards, right? So this is a fetch-based application. So it's a little bit different than using something like Express or Fastify or one of those, and then you just need to call this app.fire, which basically creates an event listener that listens for the fetch events and can go ahead and do some interesting things there. Okay, so that's it. That's created that route for us. If we say hello from Ampt here, exclamation, we save that, come over here, refresh. It's immediately updated, right? So we have a very, very fast feedback loop in which we can do these things. Okay, so just quickly on the Hono side of things too, like you'll see this is essentially the app that we created. The difference between export default app, if you come over here and you look at, it's probably under what, helpers or maybe concepts, routers. It's in here somewhere. Oops. Oh, I do like the dark mode better. API, Hono requests, exceptions, app. Default. Oh, here we go. So yeah, so if you're so you normally export the app, that would be for like Cloudflare workers or buns, and then you would use AppFire to automatically add a global fetch event listener. So essentially all that does is just replace or just adds this for you. You could add this directly if you wanted to, or you can just use this very simple app.fire, which obviously is a nice shortcut, and then also fetch as well if so anyways, all those capabilities are there. Like I said, Hono is a very, very good framework. I've been very, very happy with it, and that's why I've been using it. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create that CRUD piece here. So the couple things we need to do is we can go ahead and create these routes first, just so that we have those, so that we'll have the different options. So a couple things we can do is obviously we're going to want a get route to return something, but let's start with create. So I'm going to go ahead and say create here, and I'm going to do app.post. And then let's just use the standard /users, create C like that. Okay, so this is, and then I'm just going to do a return c.json, and we'll just say message user created, even though we have yet to create it yet, but we'll get that way. All right, so create, read is the next one we want. So we'll do read. And that's just going to be get. And then this is going to be get /users / and then we need an ID for a user. So let's call this user ID. And then the way that we get these, I always forget, but I'll look it up. I'm going to say user ID is going to equal, it should be, it might be c.params. It's definitely something like this, user ID, I believe. Always have to look this up. Ooh, that's an error there. Sorry, that's my fault. All right, so let's go here to the Hono request here, and we want to get parameters. So c.rec.param. Okay, so I messed that up. c.rec.param. One of these days I'll remember it. All right, so this is going to get that user ID here, and we're going to go ahead and call this return with the JSON. And this is going to say, just, how about we do this? Again, we're going to change some of this stuff because we actually are going to start working with data in a minute. But we'll say user ID like this, and that'll just return whatever we send in as that user ID. Okay, so that's our read. Okay, so we need create read. We're going to need an update. So update. All right, so this is where we get into the put versus patch thing. If we really want to update the entire record, then we would use put. So I'm just going to do this. Actually, just filled it in for me. Thank you, Copilot. So this is app.put. We're putting to this URL here. And then I'm just going to, again, throw this. We're going to update this in a minute, but we'll have that as well. And then the other thing that I want to do is I'm going to create a partial update. And this is going to be a patch requests like this. So we'll get into the semantics of that later. And then the other thing we need is a delete like this. So we will do, see if it fills it in for me. So we will app delete, and we're going to delete this resource URL, or the URL here, which again is, I don't think we think about it this way, but a uniform resource locator, which is pointing to this specific resource on the web. So we're going to delete this resource. So again, we'll get to that in a second. And then the last thing we want to do is create a list like this. Oops, a list command, and this is going to be, look at, already knows, app.get /users. So when we do a get request to the /users route, we want to get a list of those particular users. Okay, so this is obviously not going to work yet, but we're just laying the groundwork here for what it is that we're trying to do. Okay, so we should now have all these different requests or all these different endpoints that have now already been published. So these exist. This API is up, it's running, and we can actually go ahead and test it. So we saw over here we had this URL that I had clicked on, but actually when we're in here, we can just type in URL, and this will give us this URL. So let's go ahead and get this. I'm gonna, copy this. Like that. And then let's go over to Postman. And I'm going to do a GET request for this. And /users, for example, this would be our list endpoint. So I'm going to hit send. This will send the request, and this will come back and say message lists of users. So let's take this same URL, and what we want to do is create a post request to /users, and that should give us our user created message, even though a user wasn't created. Then we'll do /users, and I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3 for now. This will be a GET request, right? So this will get back that particular user. Now I just got an error, which means something is not right. And what's cool is we can actually see the real-time logs coming from here. So this says c.rec params is not a function. So let's figure out why that is. So let's go back over to Hono request param, because it's not params, it's param. That's my fault. Okay, so let's go ahead and do param. Just hide that for a second. Param, and param. Okay. All right, so this should all be synced. We can clear that out and jump over here and try this again. And now we get that user 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that was our GET request for this. We're gonna keep using this here because we wanna create another one that is going to be a put. And this would go ahead and replace this entire user. And then we wanna create a patch. And this is going to go ahead and update partially that user. And then the last one that we want to create is a delete, which would go ahead and delete that user. Okay. All right. So we've got Hono set up. We got our API basically set up. We've got the basics of, or we've got all of the routes set up, and we've got Postman here. Told you about potentially going blurry. That's my brain sometimes. We got Postman set up here that has all of the actual commands, all of the verbs and the HTTP requests that we're going to make to our API. We've got that all set up. Okay, so let's go ahead and start actually building something with data. All right, so in order to actually save this data, to persist this, we're going to use the built-in data module that Ampt has. Essentially what this is just an interface on top of DynamoDB. Again, one thing that's really great about Ampt is these are just things we don't necessarily need to think about. We just want to use a data resource that's highly scalable. Ampt data is a great way to do that because it just goes ahead and creates this DynamoDB table for us. So we're going to install Ampt data here. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab this, jump back to our thing here, and then go ahead and install Ampt data. This will install Ampt data as a resource. You can npm install this as well, or you can just type install when you're in the system here in the CLI. All right, so then we're going to import data from Ampt data like that, and save that. And then what we want to do is we want to be able to now save something that we bring in. We want to be able to save that as data. So first of all, we do need some sort of schema for the data that we have. We don't technically need a schema. We can be very loose with it because DynamoDB is very easy to do that. But we want to create a schema because we want there to be specific fields that we have. We want those fields to be validated against. We want to make sure that people aren't sending junk into our API and so forth. As of right now, this API is not protected in any way, so anybody can access this and start doing it and start making calls to this API. So we want to be very specific about what we allow for schema validation. I've talked about this in the past. I love Zod. It's very, very good. It's like Joy, but I think better. It allows you to export the types as well. So if you are doing TypeScript, you can go ahead and have those types built in. It also has some cool integrations with Hono. So if you want to do, let's see here, it's middleware, and it is third-party middleware. It might be under third-party middleware. Zod, yeah, so Zod validator, right? So Zod validator here allows you to bring this in, and then you can create your schemas and some of these other things, and then actually run the validator here, what type you want it to be, and then in the schema that you want to use. Okay, so we're just going to create a single schema here because it's, we're not getting overly complex. But if you do want to see Zod, I think it's zod.dev is the main thing here. There we go. So pretty simple. Let's see, has received the Clerk OSS Fellowship. Oh, good for you. Okay, so anyway, so in order to install it, or introduction, I don't know if we can, I mean, this is pretty simple how this works, but TRPC, Zod to X, X to Zod, blah, 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 installation. Okay, so this is, yeah, we don't have to worry about the, we don't have to worry about TypeScript. So, okay, so we're just going to import, or install Zod here. So I'm going to do install Zod like this. And then I'm going to go ahead and up here, we're going to import, I think it's just Z from Zod. Do we need, yeah, we need to wrap it though, because it's not the default export. Like this, Z from Zod. Okay, so then what we want to do is we want to create a schema for our, oh, it's already telling me to do that. Let's see if it guesses. Okay, user schema, not schemer. Okay, so user schema, we have an object that is going to have a name and an age. Okay, let's go ahead and add just a couple of other things on here. Let's do email. How about that? And this is going to be, and this is what's cool about Zod. So you can do like Z string, but then also say it's got to be an email. This we're going to say is going to be a number. And then you can do other things like you can say min. So like minimum value, let's say, is going to be, let's say you got to be at least 18, and the maximum value, if you're over 100, you can't use our application. And then like with the name, for example, we can just do a max of, so your name can't be longer than 100 characters or something like that. And I think those are right. Those were filled in for me, but let's assume they're right. Okay, so a couple different ways that we can do this. We can validate the schema at the user or at the using that validator. That is definitely one way that we can do that. That is kind of cool to do it that way. The other thing that we want to do though is we want to make sure that we're gonna have to do some optional stuff in here as well. So right now, if we try to validate this, this is going to require all the information. So let's just do that quickly, and then we can kind of see how that works. So let's say that somebody posts something here. First of all, we have to get the body of the post. So I'm going to go ahead and say body, and this is, I think it is parse body now. Parse body like this. And it's actually not going to be a body because we're going to be sending in JSON. So actually this is going to be rec JSON. I always forget to do that. And I don't think this needs to be, awaited, but let's just double check. So if we do JSON, yes, we do have to await it. Okay, so one thing we need to do is make sure that these functions are async, and we're going to await c.json. So let's just do this. Let's go ahead and, rather than worrying about that yet and the user created, let's just do message, and then I'm actually going to do body here so we can see what we send in for the body. Okay, so let's go back to our postman here, and let's get to post, which is this one here. So we're creating a new resource. So if I go ahead and hit send, let's see what this does. This gives me an error, and let's see why. Again, this is what makes debugging unexpected end of JSON input. Okay, so it wasn't able to, so body probably, I didn't send in any JSON, so it didn't it didn't know what to do. Oh, because I sent it as text. Okay, so I want to actually send in JSON here, which is, hold on, that's not, no, that's just parsing it as JSON, right? I want to go to body, here we go. And we'll send this in as raw, and it's JSON, there we go. And then I'm just gonna type in here, I'll just put name for now, and we'll say Jane Smith, like this. Okay, so let me send this. That worked. Okay, so now this is just spitting out, it's just parroting whatever we send in there. It's not actually creating a user. So I'm gonna go ahead and add some more information, and we'll say age, and this needs to be wrapped. And we'll say age is, I don't know, 25, and the email is Jane J. Smith at developer.com, like that. Okay. Sorry if that's too small, by the way. All right, send that in. Okay, great. So now we see that the information is coming in there. So now there's no validation against this. We're not using Zod at this point. So let's go back and actually then validate this information. So if we do const, oops, weird, const, and we'll call it user, and then we take the user schema and we parse it. We'll parse the body. That will go ahead and spit back information for us. I'm just going to clear this out. That's going to go ahead and spit back whether or not it's valid or not. The problem with using parse, though, is that when we use parse, if it's not right, it's just going to fail and return an error. We want to be able to use safe parse, which will give us the ability to not fail if there's something wrong with the body. And so what I'm going to do here is, rather than logging the body out, I'm going to log the user out. And then we're going to do the same exact call here. And then you'll see that the user is returning success true with the data. And that is the parsed and even transformed data. So we can actually do some transformations in Zod as part of the schema parsing, which is pretty cool actually, because you can do things like, if you want to modify something or add something to it. Maybe you want to convert something from a string to a number or whatever, or you can do all kinds of things like that, and it'll just do it as part of the Zod library. So it gives you some good ways to really control the schemas that are happening there. All right, so this is fine because this is valid, but let's say that we go ahead and we add, we call this email X, for example. So now when we send this in, we're going to get success is false, and then we're going to get an error object, and under that error object, we're going to get a array of issues. So this will tell us that it's an invalid type. It was expecting a string, it was undefined, and the path was email, message was required. So this is cool because, again, the way that Zod works is, if this isn't a valid email, so let's say I get rid of the .com, and I go ahead and send this in, this is going to tell me that this is an invalid email. Now, a couple other cool things that you can do if you want to sort of customize some of this stuff is you could go back and say, okay, well, I guess if it's an invalid email, then I want this or whatever. So you can actually go into the user schema here. And if I was to go ahead and type in something here and say, please enter a valid, email, and save this, then when I send this exact same thing in and send it, I'll get the message back as please enter a valid email. So you can do a lot of cool things, and that can be based off of whether it was a string or whatever. So again, like even if I was to do something like this, so let's say that I send in this as a number, so 1, 2, 3, and I send this in here, this is going to actually say expected a string, right? So if I want, I can actually come over here and do something similar and say, please enter a string like that. And then if I was to submit that here, did I save that? Yeah, hold on, let me try that again. I think maybe I have to, hold on. I know there's a way to do this, but you can basically also, hold on, I got to figure out how to do this. Strings, maybe you don't put it in the string there, you do, I know you can control Z string required error, invalid type error. Oh, so actually that's kind of cool. You can customize the error messages that way, or you can just use message as part of that. So again, if you do it in the string, so actually that's kind of cool. So you could do both, right? So you could come over here and hit this, and then you could say if it's missing completely, you can say email is required, and then you could say email must be a string. Right, so now our schema is getting a little bit a little bit more complex, but when I send this now, this will say email must be a string. And if I don't provide it at all and send it in, then it says email is required. So that's cool. You can do the parsing there and you can control the messaging and some of that other stuff. All right, so, and then also same idea here is if we sent in like 25, this is why you get an array as well. So now I get expected a number, received a string, for age, and then we get another error message that is email is required. So what's cool is you can loop over those, create a list of error messages that you want to give back to a user. Okay, so let's go ahead and just make this valid so that we don't have to worry about this right now, and we can get into some more checking in a minute. Oops. So email. I wish I could type here. Email is Jane, or what did I say? J Smith at developer.com. Okay, so that should be valid now. If I send that in, all right, I'm going to get success equals true. All right, so now we want to take this data and we want to save it. So a couple of things we need to do is, one, we have to create a resource identifier. So in order to create a resource identifier, I'm just going to use a ULID. I guess we create a UUID. Yeah, because it won't matter for this. So I'm going to install I'm going to do ULID. Doesn't matter. All right, so we've installed ULID. ULIDs are just sortable, unique characters. We can have a debate as to why, or you would want to use ULID versus UUID for this, or generate some other number. I'm not going to worry about it. The other thing we could possibly do is also keep we could create our own number generator in DynamoDB, using an incrementer if we wanted to. Okay, so anyway, so we're going to use ULID. ULID is pretty simple. It just generates a number for a identifier for us. So we're going to do import, and then we're just going to import ULID from ULID like that, and then we're going to take this ULID here, and we're going to go ahead now. And so now we've got a body. We've got, so we bring the body, we parse the body to create our user here. We want to create a user ID. So I'm just going to go ahead and do user ID. That's going to equal ULID, which will generate that new user for us. And then what we want to do is insert this into a database. So inserting into the database is extremely easy when we're using Ampt, because the data module just gives us that capability. So I'm going to go ahead and do DB, or I'll just actually call this, let's just call this result. And we're going to do await data.set. And we are going to set this. So the first thing we want to do is we need to create a key for this. So some way in which we can identify this particular user. We're going to use that ULID, obviously, to do that. That makes the most sense. But I'm just going to use this user pound prefix. Again, not necessary to do that, but I do want to do that. And then we want to go ahead and use that user ID and then user, and we're going to get or save as part of this the user.data, right? That's the result. That's what we get back here. And so what this should do is create a record for us in the database that's going to create this user ID. And it's going to create this new user for us. It's going to put the user data in there. And the only other thing that I would want to do is I do want this user ID to be part of the specification, or part of the record itself. So even though we'll save it as the key, I don't want to go ahead and have to parse that out later. So we're gonna make sure that we include that here as well. So usually, if you I have to look up the spec, but returning a URL from a post request. Let's see, HTTP post redirect to return URL. Let's see, can a post request return a redirect? Yes, but that's not what we're talking about. Using post instead of get for retrieving a resource. Is it okay to post a response? All right, so this is not what I'm, here's the post submission related. All right, so, okay, well, let's just do this. I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna store the resource identifier as part of this. So let's go ahead and do user user.data. So we'll just we're going to pull all that user.data in with a spread operator. And then let's call this, let's see, we'll call it resource ID. How about that? And this is going to be slash users slash user ID. Okay, save that, get that all out of the way and see what it is. All right, so essentially what we're doing is we're going to pass in this resource ID that will give us the resource ID or the identifier of this resource so that we can use that to do our further operations. I think there's a better way to do this. I should have looked this up before. Again, I'm also not a REST API expert in terms of following all of the HTTP specifications, but usually we do return the URL with it or have that there so that we can go ahead and make changes to it. But anyways, all right, let's do this now. So what we've done is we've now written to the database, or we're trying to write to the database, and we're going to go ahead and spit back the actual result. So this is going to give us the result of the operation that we created. Now, a couple different things here is that with the data.set, when you use that with Ampt, that's going to return by default the object, so the full object that was created. It is not going to give you any of the metadata like the timestamps, created and modified and stuff like that. If we wanted to get that back, we could. We would pull that back by just adding the meta, but we're going to try to keep this as clean as possible right now. So we're going to ignore that, and we're just going to pull back the actual result itself. The problem here is that we actually don't want results. We want to go ahead and bring back, well, I guess what we could do is just, this is going to return an object, so that's kind of pointless to do that twice. So we'll just go ahead and return the object here. All right, so we should be good to go. I'm going to go back over to my Postman here, and let's go ahead and create this. So I'm going to hit send, and this has now returned to me Jane Smith at developer.com, name Jane Smith, age 25, with a resource ID of this here. So this is now our resource ID that should allow us to get Jane Smith's record. Okay, couple things just to be aware of as well is that if we go ahead and type in open here, this will bring us into the dashboard. We can go into my sandbox and into data and get all the items, and we will see that we have created this Jane Smith record, age 25, with this resource ID for us to be able to access and make changes to it if we want to. So anyways, that is there. Okay, so that is created. So now what we want to be able to do is, and actually, you know what we didn't do is we didn't actually, so we validated this, but we didn't check to see if it was, we didn't actually test for it to be valid. So hold on, let's just do that quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if user dot success, or if the user.success is false, then we want to return a message that there were a bunch of errors. Let's just return let's see, user.user. Yeah, that'll return. Now, I guess it's not overly important, but what we do want to do is return an error, and this is going to be, we'll return this as a 400 error because it'll be a bad data. This will return right out of it, so so none of this will execute if this returns, so we don't have to wrap this in a bunch of if statements. So what this should do here is if we go back to Postman, and let's go ahead and create an error or an invalid schema. We'll go ahead and hit send. This will come back, give us a 400 bad request, and it will tell us that expected a number, received a string. So we have that validation in there, and if we wanted to, let's say, create a new user, let's say John Doe, I don't know, and he's going to be 23. And then this is going to be jdoe@developer.com. Go ahead and send this, and we now have jdoe@developer.com, John Doe, with this resource ID. And back in here, we'll now see that we have those 2 records. Okay. So let's now use that in order to return some information. Now, one of the things that I just realized that I did is I didn't give us the ability to create lists. So I'm going to actually delete these 2 items here. And this is the magic of development. We're going to actually make it so that we can list these users. So the way that we can list these users is not to use a pound here, but actually we're going to go ahead and do users : so this is going to create a users collection for us that will allow us now to query by those users. And the fact that we are using user ID and using ULIDs now actually makes sense because we could sort them in the order in which they were created. With the order in which they're created, right? So this will sort them by a timestamp, but still give us that unique ID. So let's start with that and try that again. So I'm going to go back over to my, hopefully that made sense what I just said. All right, so let's create this guy again. I'll hit send, and this is going to do the same exact thing. Everything is exactly the same, but the only difference is now we're saving this different in the database. So now we're doing users : and then that ID. And I'll show you why that's important in a minute. So let's go back over here and let's go ahead and recreate our Jane Smith as well. So Jane Smith, we said she was 25, and update this to be Jane Smith. And send that. That is valid. And then let's create one more. And then we'll call, let's see, what's another name that we can use? I don't know. I'm drawing a blank on names here. Let's do William Jones. How about that? And William's 45 years old. And we'll use the W Jones at developer.com. And then we'll save that. And we get William Jones, age 45, with another resource ID. Okay, so now in our database, we have these users. So we want to do a list command first. So let's go back to our thing here, to our code. And we'll go down to where we have our list. So this is a GET request to the /users endpoint. This should get all of our users. I'm not going to worry about pagination right now, but fairly easy to do. So I'm going to go ahead and do const users, and we're going to await a get, data.get. I cannot type today, and it's going to be users.star. This is going to have to be async, like that. So this will go ahead and get all of our users by doing this user : star. This is a feature of DynamoDB, or I guess, yes, a feature of DynamoDB in that it uses keys and or partition keys and sort keys in order to make this happen. Basically, anything on the left of the colon is a partition, and the partition key, anything to the right of it is the sort key. So this allows us, this star gives us the begins with capability, which is pretty cool. Also, what's nice about ULIDs is that they are representative time, so you can actually get a ULID that represents a specific time, and then you can use that and do like a between. Anyways, there's some cool things that you can do, but we're going to try to keep this somewhat simple. So this is going to go ahead and grab the users, and then we want to return those users. So a couple of things about this is if we just return users like this, which we can do, and we go back here to our GET request on the /users, and we hit this, this will go ahead and return all of those users to us. I don't know why I can't adjust this. There we go. So this will return all the users to us, but you'll see the way that it works is essentially it's returning the it spits back an items array. That items array contains the key and the value for each one of these users. We want to get this back and make it a little bit cleaner, a response. So what we're going to do is we want to return the user.items. And then the other thing that we want to do is we actually want to go ahead and we want to map this users, because we only want to get the user information. We just want to get the user value. So this should work, assuming my programming skills are fine, which they are apparently, well, at least for this. So we go ahead and get just an array back that's going to give us each one of these users. Now, again, this is the order in which the users were created. And the reason why this is the order in which they were created is because we're using this ULID and we're sorting by the sort key, which is the ULID value, which again is lexicographically sortable, whatever. I can't pronounce that word. The other thing that we could do here if we wanted to is we could do this reverse true like this, and that would actually just sort them in the opposite direction. So we should get Jones first, then Smith, then Joe. So that gives us the ability if we did want to sort these in a different direction. Again, we're going to keep this relatively simple. You probably just saw there that there's also this limit option, right? So if we did want to limit this to, let's say, 2, and then we were to bring this back here, this will just bring back 2. So we're not going to worry about a limit for now. We're going to say whatever, we'll bring back as many people as we want to, and we'll worry about pagination another day, but you can do that as well. So refresh this, we're getting all of our users back. Okay, great. So now the other thing that we want to be able to do is get back an individual user. So in this case, if we wanted to get back, say, Jane Smith, this resource here, if we go to this get, right? This is the resource that we want to use in order to get that user. So I'm going to click send. We haven't done anything with that endpoint, but we are obviously parsing that param correctly, and we're seeing that we're at least represented. We're trying to represent this particular resource. So let's go over here. I'm going to copy this just to make life easier, and we're going to go ahead and do get here on that user ID. I'm going to call this just user. Going to make this async. Should have done that in the beginning for all of them. Going to get that user ID, and then here is where I'm actually going to go ahead and grab this user ID like this and make that a template literal so that I can actually get that back. So this will return the user, and then what I want to do is I actually want to return just user like this. Now, because it's not coming back as a list, because I'm getting a single user, I'm just going to get back the value. If I wanted to get the key and all the other information associated with it, I could request the metadata as part of it here, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to do it like this. Assuming this works, I should be able to request this, and now I get my my information. So I'm getting all of this data back. Perfect. All right, so now I've got my list set up, I've got my create set up, and I've got my read set up, so I can see those. All right, so the last two things that we have to do are probably the more difficult ones, right? So we want to go ahead and do a put, and we want to do a patch. So let's start with the put, because we're just going to replace the entire thing altogether. So let me go and grab the same information pretty much that we're going to get here from, oops. I hate when I do that. Same information I'm going to use when I did the create. And we're going to go here to the update, which is going to be the put. So one of the things that we want to do a little bit differently here is we do need the user ID, which we are not going to use from the ULID. We're not going to generate that, but instead we're going to make this async. Okay, so we're going to grab the user ID from the URL. So that we're assuming this user ID exists. We're going to parse the body because it's going to be another JSON that we're going to parse into it. We're going to grab the body. We're going to parse the body using our user schema to make sure that we in fact have all the correct information from that user and that everything is valid. And then the same exact thing here is that if the user success has failed, we're going to return back and say, nope, you can't update this user because of that there. Okay, we now have the user data. We have the resource ID. So this is exactly the same as a put request. We're literally just replacing the user. And then again here, we can go ahead and change this to just spit back the result so that we can see what we get. All right, so a couple different things here is one, we're requiring all of the fields that are required to create a new user, same as we're doing with the past, because we're updating the entire representation of that resource. But now we have to say, okay, do we want to make sure that this user exists in the database, or do we want to allow for a create this user if they don't exist? So there's two different ways to do this. One is we could put it using whatever whatever ID we wanted to use. That's how this would work right now. If I went and posted this right now, I could put any ID I want, and that would create a new user with that ID. So that we don't want to do generally, because that's not necessarily the right idea, because we want a unique ID. We want that to be sortable. We want to have that. We want to make sure we follow that standard. So what we could do here is we could check to see if this user existed, and then if the user if the user existed, then go through with the operation. If they didn't exist, then we wouldn't go through with that operation. So that's one way we could do it. But I think what we want to try to do here is basically try to stick to the idea of this is a true put. This is replacing a resource that already exists. So we will only update this if the resource exists. So here's what we can do. In our set request, we have an option where we can go ahead and type in exists, and we can say exists true. That's all documented, by the way. If you come over here to the data and you type exists here, forces an existence check when setting an item. See existence checks. What this essentially says is to add an item only if it does not exist. Then you say exist equals false. If you want to go ahead and say it has to exist before I can do it, then you set it to true. So it's basically like a put or an update request, but it gives you that. It gives you the ability to do that. So now when we do this, when we try to put this is going to say this item already has to exist before we can update it, and that's exactly what we want. So if this happens and it fails, it's going to throw us an error. So we do need to catch this. So let's just go ahead and do a try here, and then we will catch it here with an E, and then if it does fail, we want to go ahead and return. So actually what we're going to do is, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say right now, item does not exist, which should be, I believe, a 404, right? But I'm also going to log out the error message that we get here, because I'm going to show you something about this. All right, so I've saved this here. So two things. One, we should be able to go back to a Postman here, and we want to go ahead and I'm going to take this Jane Smith. I'm going to copy this, and we're going to go over to our put request here. So this is where we're replacing this. So go into body, go into raw. I'm going to put this as a JSON object. I'm going to paste in this information, and I am not going to paste in this part because we don't need this. This would actually give us an error if we tried to do that. And I'm going to replace this with that resource identifier. All right, so now if I try to do this, and we'll say that she's 26 now. If I go ahead and send this put request in, I'll get an error. Let's see why. Debug, debug, debug. Hold on. So this is saying that result is not defined. Okay, what did I do? Oh, because I wrapped result here and I caught it. So what I actually want to do is just return the result there. So if it doesn't catch, it's just bad programming. Come back over here and let's try this again. So we'll send this. And now this has gone ahead and updated it to 26. But for example, if I was to get rid of name here, and I was to try to send this in, I'm going to get a message saying that it's invalid and this is going to be a 404 bad request. Okay, so let me add this back in. And let's say, I don't know, she changed her name to Janie Smith, and I'll go ahead and send this. So this is going to update everything. Everything's going to be great. Okay, now if I tried to I'm going to add an X to this, and I'm going to try to send this in. This is going to give me an error message saying the item does not exist. But the actual error message that I got back here was error item does not exist. That was my log message. I think if I do, let me try one more thing. E.message. And try that. item does not exist. Okay, so I could validate this, or I can just basically say, I guess I could just do this. I'll just do e.message. I guess I could clean this up more. I could test it to make sure that there's a message, an error type here that it will come back as a item not found or a constraint validation thing. But anyway, so I'll just do this, and then what this should do is when I send this, I'll get the same item does not exist, but this is coming back as the error message is being generated from the try catch. Okay, so that works there because that doesn't exist. And then if I go ahead and do this, then this will work again and will be updated. Okay, so next step is I want to come over here. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go over to my patch. And in my patch, in my body, I'm going to do raw. It'll be JSON. I'm going to send this information in here. I'm going to copy my resource ID so that I have it. And paste that there. I know we're almost out of time here. All right, so the only thing I want to do now is I just want to update the name field. How about that? So we just want to update Janie Smith's name. If I go ahead and send this in, by the way, I should just get the user ID back because we're not doing anything with this yet. So I just want to send in the name. So a couple things that we can do to get this working is this is going to be a partial update. So I'm going to copy the same exact stuff that I took from here. And we're going to work with this. So I'll copy this and we'll come down to the patch and we'll paste this in here. Okay, so almost all of this, I gotta do my async here. Okay, so almost all of this is exactly the same. So if I left this the same here, by the way, and just jump over to here and hit send, I'm just gonna get my error messages because it's not doing the full, the full update of the resource. Okay, so what I wanna do is I actually want to use this schema, but I want to make it so that not everything there is, or that all of the fields are optional, right? So making them optional means that if they exist, then they still have to constrain to the schema. But if you don't send them in, then it'll say, oh, okay, you don't need this. Okay, so in Zod, if we go back here, we can do, I think it is, let's see, optional. That's to make it .optional there, but we can do, is it, be pick, objects, pick, omit, strict, so I think it, partial, is it here? Okay, so inspired by the built-in type makes all properties optional. That's what we want. Okay, so we can create a partial version by using partial user.partial. There's also, again, I think it has pick and the other ones too. So if you wanted to say like, well, you always have to send in the name, even if you're doing a partial update, you can do that. But with this, it's pretty cool because literally all we need to do is just this partial method. And then what we do is we just call partial on that itself. So what I'm going to do is come here and say, we have this user schema, but I'm actually going to go ahead and create a partial user schema. And then I call user schema partial, so it knows exactly what to do. And then I'm going to have this as partial user schema like this. And then this will go ahead and allow me to go ahead and send these in and make the changes just to one particular thing here. So I'll click send, so I can change the name there. If I sent in nothing, it updates nothing, but it works fine. You could do something that says, well, you have to have at least one object in there, otherwise one update, otherwise it's gonna fail. But let's say I wanna update the age, we'll set the age to 30. Do need to send in valid JSON, by the way. Go ahead and hit send. The age updates to 30. If, now this is what's cool, if I were to send in the age as a string versus a number and I sent that, then I'm gonna go ahead and get those error messages back there as well. Expected number, received a string. And like I showed you earlier, you can go ahead and customize each one of these messages. And I'm just dumping everything back there. If you wanted to loop through and give a prettier message, message back, you could do that. But again, we're getting a 400 back here. And then Another thing that's cool here is with this, even though it's a partial update, if I wanted to, I can send in, let's do name, and we'll say Jane A. Smith. Right, Smith. So I can send in multiple things and send those. Those will update, Jane A. Smith plus the age. I don't know if I had changed the age on that one. Jane B. Smith, send. B. Smith 31. Okay, so that's it. We've created a full CRUDL app in just about an hour here with schema validation, with data storage, with the ability to do all the lists. Again, if I come back here and I retrieve this again, we're going to see that this is Jane B. Smith now, age 31. So these are updated for us. So we have. That's it. We've done it all. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? And we didn't get a chance to add authentication to this, which would be a nice feature to add, so that people can't just go ahead and update update things on this resource without without some sort of validation, or without some sort of authentication and authorization in order for them to do that. But you get the point. So that's something we could add in. The other thing we could add in here, if we wanted to, again, we don't have time, but you could go ahead and add in cores to this. So if you did want to do cores, there is a built-in cores middleware that is pretty simple. You essentially just go ahead and, you can specify a bunch of things here in terms of if you want to, limit specific things and do that. But yeah, so that's an API. That's a CRUDL API that follows, I think, most of the specifications. I do need to look up, how you would return. I just haven't done this in a long time. How I built a true to spec REST API in a long time, but exactly how you would return the resource identifier as part of that as well when you create a new item. Where you get that resource item or uniform resource locator from when you do that. But anyways, all right. I hope that this was useful. Hope that you get some value out of it. Maybe you learned a little bit about what HTTP and hypermedia really means. As much as I could, as much information as I could, or knowledge I could transfer to you. But anyway, so. Yeah, like I said, it's pretty easy to use Ampt. We try to make it super simple. There's a whole bunch of built-in things here that you can play around with. Go and sign up. It's free to play around with the preview environments or a sort of a preview tier that lets you do some cool things and try it out, and then build some cool stuff on it. So anyways, give it a try. Let me know what you think. And, if you ever have questions, please feel free to reach out to me or somebody else on the team, and would be happy to chat with you. So until next week.